So let's talk about the 37. It's a fascinating aircraft, and I have to admit, I don't know much about it. So, what were your first thoughts on the aircraft? Because is it basically a souped up 30, like when you were going through training, a 37?
Yeah, it was. Cessna built that, as I understood, back during Vietnam. We didn't. The Air Force didn't have a light attack aircraft,
Right,
so Cessna took the T-37 and beefed it all up. It had a different landing gear, much heavier landing gear.
right,
They put F5 engines in it, basically without the afterburner.
right.
Um, it was built to be a light attack, so it would drop Mark 81s, which are the 250-pound bombs. They had a little a minigun in it, a 7.62 machine gun in the nose. When we were forward air controllers, they took those out. They didn't want FACs strafing. They didn't want them to go down low and
Right.
get shot up. So, but it was a very, very maneuverable aircraft. My initial thought was, wow, this is pretty archaic, but it had a lot of history, a lot of legacy to it. And then they started using them in Vietnam as forward air control aircraft as well. The call signs were typically nil call signs. And so that's what they used the platform when they brought them back here, and they were still training with them. And at the time I was in, that's pretty much what I got. But it was it was a fun little airplane to fly. It would cruise to and from the ranges at about 230 knots. It had tip tanks on the wings. To me, it wasn't a great forward air control aircraft because the visibility wasn't that great. You had these tip tanks on the end of the wings, and so you're trying to look over that. We would typically carry 4 drop tanks, 2 on each wing of fuel, is a flying fuel tank, with 2 pods of white phosphorus rockets. And that's what we'd mark the targets with. At night, we'd obviously go out with canisters of flares to illuminate the target areas. But again, it was a fun little airplane. We had them. I was stationed at Davis-Monthan down in Tucson, Arizona.
Nice.
Just down the street was the A-10 schoolhouse. So typically we would control and train with the A-10s. So that kind of went like you'd call them up, you'd be scheduled, you'd call up the A-10s you were supposed to work with, and you'd get a hold of their flight lead or their instructor and say, hey, what do you need us to do for you today? And when you start talking about forward air controlling, there was low threat and there was high threat scenarios. Do you want which type of scenario do you want? What do you want us to work on? And then we'd go out there and we would control them. If you didn't have any support, typically a lot of times it was kind of fun. We'd take off in a 2-ship, and we were both loaded with the little 25-pound BDU blue bombs, and one of us would play FAC and the other aircraft would play the fighter. So we would control ourselves. And so you got to learn not only how to shoot rockets, but to drop bombs. I mean, the thing was, like I mentioned earlier, it would drop Mark 81s. We never dropped any real Mark 81s, or it was mostly just little blue bombs. But it had an iron sight in it, so you learned how to drop manual bombs, which in today's environment, that was a backup mode in the F-16, and F-16 guys that never had dropped a manual bomb, they were scared to death to do that. But, we all knew how to do that, and it was a lot of fun because, you had to be at the right place in the sky on altitude, on the right dive angle, and at the right airspeed, and theoretically no wind, the bomb was going to hit the target. So it was a lot of fun.